Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, or if you're in Central Asia, good evening. This is the forum of the Central Asia-Caucasus Institute, and we're happy that you joined us for this discussion on U.S. relations with Central Asia in the direct aftermath of the first ever summit of Central Asian leaders with the President of the United States that was held a week ago in New York. Our speakers today will discuss what was agreed at the meeting, but more than anything, we would like to focus on the future. Will there be concrete steps taken that matter to the security and prosperity of the region, and that will strengthen trust in the U.S. as a serious long-term partner for Central Asia, for countries that are increasingly feeling the squeeze of Russia and China? Or put otherwise, will the U.S. be willing to take meaningful steps to help its Central Asian partners maintain their sovereignty and independence and avoid a situation where Russia and China create a sort of hegemony over the Eurasian continent? To discuss this and obviously many other issues of importance in the relationship, we have three wonderful speakers. We're honored to have Uzbekistan's ambassador to the United States, Mr. Furqat Sidikov. Mr. Sidikov is new to Washington, but not really. Mr. Sidikov, Ambassador Sidikov, served here twice before for a total of almost a decade. He also spent much of his career in the analytic community in the Institute of Regional and International Studies in Tashkent, and he most recently served for 5 years as ambassador to Pakistan, a fascinating job at which we might want to hear more from you at some point, Ambassador. After Ambassador Sidikov, we will hear from Anders Wimbush, who is a longtime friend of the Central Asia-Caucasus Institute. He's a distinguished fellow at the American Foreign Policy Council, where, of course, the Central Asia-Caucasus Institute is headquartered. In a long career, he served as senior director at the German Marshall Fund, senior vice president of the Hudson Institute. He was a governor of the United States Broadcasting Board of Governors, and should I say in another life, perhaps, as director of Radio Liberty in Munich, Germany, alongside many other accomplishments. The final speaker for this crowd needs no introduction, the chairman of the Central Asia-Caucasus Institute, Frederick Starr. With that, Ambassador, I'd leave the floor to you. We're eager to hear your insights and experiences and perhaps your predictions about where we're going in this relationship.
Yeah, thanks so much. Good morning again. And first of all, I would like to thank you all. It's a great honor and privilege for me to be here to speak to this event. Dear Dr. Starr, Mr. Wimbush, and Dr. Cornell, Assalamu alaikum. Again, first of all, let me just express thanks to you for inviting me for this event, following up C+51 Presidential Summit, which was really a historical summit, and we're considering it like very historical summit, and we believe that success of the summit will help us to enhance cooperation between the United States and Central Asia. First of all, summit has clear affirmed that our bilateral and regional ties with the United States are on the historical rise. As the new Uzbekistan continues to take shape, President Biden's administration has welcomed and supported all democratic and socio-economic reforms that have led to the comprehensive strategic partnership between our states. Nowadays, Uzbekistan carries out ambitious economic reforms agenda, and this highly reflected during the C+51 summit. As new Uzbekistan continues to take shape, the Biden administration has welcomed and supported democratic and market reforms, which has yielded and enhanced our comprehensive strategic partnership with the United States. I would like to tell you that, as you mentioned, I used to work with in the United States more than 10 years, and I can compare our cooperation in the past and the now. I am very happy to say that now we have a very trusted, open, strategic dialogue, and there are no any issues which we cannot discuss. There are no any issues which we cannot solve. We're enjoying very trusted and very open, constructive dialogue, political dialogue with the United States. The reforms in Uzbekistan have created new opportunities for cooperation between Uzbekistan and the United States. This annual political consultation have been elevated to strategic partnership dialogue, advancing closer and stronger cooperation between the United States in all fields, including security, military cooperation, and more important, now we are pushing a lot to enhance our trade investment cooperation. Our engagement with the United States Congress has been equally robust. The Congressional Uzbekistan Caucus has significantly expanded. New Uzbekistan unwavering dedication of fostering the business-friendly environment, increased trade and investment with the United States. Last 2 years, our trade turnover with the United States increased more than 60%. The number of American companies operating in Uzbekistan has doubled in the past 6 years. Iconic companies like Caterpillar, John Deere, Boeing, CNH Industrial, General Electric, Hilton, and others have increased their investments in Uzbekistan, including during the recent visit of the President of Uzbekistan, we signed investment projects with the American Aero Products Company more than for $10 billion. This investment will go to gas processing, renewable energies, and green energy. If we will realize these projects, Uzbekistan will become leading country in the region on the green energy and renewable energy sector. This tendency also relevant for the C+1 platform development, which is 8 years ago has been integrated in Samarkand. Over the years, the format has developed, hosting more than 12 ministerial meetings. But one of the triggers of this development was new Uzbekistan foreign policy, which changed situations not only in Uzbekistan, but in Central Asia, strengthening mutual trust in Central Asia. In the February 2017, President Shavkat Mirziyoyev outlined the main priorities of Uzbekistan foreign policy, where establishing stable and good relations with neighboring countries took a central role. This approach has resolved long-standing border issues, fostered economic partnership. Moreover, energy and water issues, which are over the years have been limited factor of regional cooperation, become an opportunity of closer partnership. And these initiatives has been supported by leaders of Central Asia, who are also putting regional partnership cornerstone of their foreign policy. As a result, the states of the region are closer to each other than ever before, which is indicating a more in-depth partnership allowed to level up the cooperation within the C+1 format. This was a part of comprehensive development C+1 platform into the Presidential Summit. Now, focusing on the results of summit, I should highlight that President Shavkat Mirziyoyev has outlined strategic priorities for the collective advancement of Central Asia. This including deepening the trade, investment, and project cooperation, developing key transport corridors, including Trans-Afghan Corridor and Middle Caspian Corridor, mainstreaming environmental protection and human rights, and expanding educational linkages. As we look ahead, it's clear that for Central Asia and the United States to further deep relationship, the role of each Central Asian nation, including Uzbekistan, will be crucial. So how we can build a momentum generated from this historical summit? First, it's essential to continue institutionalizing C+1 format. The establishment of C+1 secretariat consisting the senior diplomats was a step in the right direction. Following the up, regular joint working groups would further enhance cooperation across the sector. We believe that having this summit annually or at least one time in 2 years will help increase cooperation between the United States and Central Asia. Second, Uzbekistan welcomes U.S. support of blaster, border security, and transport corridors. But more can be done on enhancing integration, which also serve as a boost regional tourism and trade. Developing trans-regional corridors, diversified transport, and energy follows. So, Uzbekistan appreciated the increasing funds for the climate action and environmental protection, but the greater financing and technical support is requirement for major regional initiatives on water conservation, green technology transfer, and clean energy transition. Post, advancing trade and transport connectivity must remain central, including under Central Asia Trade and Investment Framework Agreement, TIFA. The recent TIFA Council meeting in the March 2023 in Samarkand opened promising avenues for the economic cooperation, but more regular trade delegation between Central Asia and US are needed. Fifth, Uzbekistan will continue assisting Afghanistan stabilization through projects like Thermal Logistic Hub, Trans-Afghan Corridor. Deep US support in connecting Central Asia and South Asia is vital. We believe that situation in Afghanistan, Afghan issue is still one of the biggest international problems, and we have to work together to bring more stability and prosperity to Afghanistan. In summary, the C+1 Presidential Summit has set a foundation to scale up win-win partnership and underscore the shared desire to build stronger foundation for Central Asia and the US ties. But realizing full potential of C+1 format requires translating political will into tangible actions. Uzbekistan stands ready to work hand in hand with our United States and fellow Central Asian states to fulfill the promise of the prosperity for the region. We believe that format C+1 could be a very effective mechanism to enhance trade investment projects between Central Asia and the United States. Thank you so much for your attention. I am ready to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. We will proceed to our next two speakers, and then we will move on to the Q&A. Anders, your turn.
Thank you, Svante. And let me say first how delightful it is to see you and Fred together, and you, Ambassador, whom I haven't seen in a number of years, but welcome back to Washington. You certainly have earned that chair. I applaud the C5+1, and one can begin to see the emergence of some very positive results from it. I remain, however, somewhat of a skeptic, and I'd like to at least pose a few questions that I hope will help us bring the C5+1 into better focus. And the questions are really five. First, why now? Why, at this juncture in history, have the Americans decided to reach out? C5+1, the president doesn't meet with 5 presidents, even if it's in the context of a United Nations General Assembly, without a lot of preparation and a lot of planning. Why now? 2, what do the Americans seek to accomplish through the C5+1? The ambassador has given us some ideas about what could take place and what has begun to take place, but I am curious about what the larger strategic plan from the Americans is, if there is one. Third, are the Americans' expectations realistic? Does the United States receive from this something for the investment that it is now embarked upon? 4, what capabilities do we possess to realize those expectations? One has to wonder about has to question the geopolitics of the region, and ask, I think, the very trenchant question is that, does the United States have the instruments? Does it have the capabilities to actually move the needle much in this region at this point? And finally, the last question, which probably we should begin with, is what's their staying power? If one looks at the larger geopolitical and security context of the Americans' decision to trigger the C5+1, it might be the case that the White House has finally awakened to the strategic importance and geopolitical value of Central Asia, as a number of us, the two of you, particularly in Washington, you and Fred, have pushed for literally decades. It might be that they've now awakened to that. But this is clearly something they didn't grasp when they surrendered Afghanistan and imploded the U.S. strategic footprint in Central Asia, and with much of that, the American competitive advantage. Now, I might be a little overly optimistic, but I do believe that the C5+1 suggests that the Biden administration, unlike the administrations preceding it, recognizes that Central Asia is not just the unimportant remains of the Soviet Union, but rather an integral part of Asia, and that Central Asia's geopolitics is bound up organically with the competition in Asia between the United States and China. It's hard to know if recognizing Central Asia's strategic importance is a new phenomenon or if it's a reversal. After all, Central Asia received not a single mention in the Biden administration's national security strategic guidance when it took office, despite the reality that the competition with China was emphasized almost everywhere. So if I'm correct in assuming that the White House is sharpening its strategic focus on Central Asia, it will be important, I think, to understand the geopolitical context in which that sharpening is taking place. And it's going to be extremely important for our Central Asian colleagues to understand that geopolitical context and the way the Americans understand the geopolitical context if they're going to set their expectations effectively, and if they're going to create the conversation that will resonate in the United States. The larger security context, in my view, has become increasingly clear in the last year. And in fact, Washington has done very little to disguise it. Stated simply, it's a multi-vectored strategy to counter China's accelerating and assertive activity throughout the Indo-Pacific and beyond, including Central Asia. All one has to do is look at the last few months, and you begin to see some of the prominent indicators of Washington's intent. Courting India, a Modi state visit in June, the G20, which just finished, where the U.S.-India relationship was raised to a strategic comprehensive partnership. The common creation of a security agenda with South Korea and Japan, revitalizing the United States and Philippines Defense Alliance, U.S. military drills in Malaysia and Singapore, naval acquisitions from the U.S. by Australia, even negotiations with Vietnam for F-16s. These are all among other telling initiatives, but the common stimulus for all of them is China. So only a brief glance at the map running from Japan around the Indo-Pacific, the Indian Ocean, suggests that the C5+1 is an initial effort to close the defense circle around China, running around that perimeter, if only at this time with a dotted line. So if this assessment is correct, then the conversations Central Asians enjoy with the US as a result of the C5+1 will in some way have to reflect and echo this foremost US security interest. There are other concerns that the US is going to have, and my expectation is that most of them will concern security at one point or another. For example, a secondary concern that's going to preoccupy American planners as they contemplate Central Asia is the possibility of a sustained period of instability throughout the Eurasian heartland. Central Asia is surrounded by troubled and unstable states on all sides. Russia's pathologies don't require further explanation here. China is headed toward economic and demographic downturns that could be highly destabilizing. Afghanistan, Pakistan, well, what's more to add there? The larger question, it seems to me, is what happens next in Iran as it struggles to keep its highly destabilizing economic, political, security, social, and cultural dynamics from becoming fully revolutionary. In contrast, Central Asia, especially Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, they're Central Asia's key actors, appear to be stable, competent, confident, and contained. At the C5+1, President Biden's emphasis on building regional ties, energy security, and business, to my mind, hit the right notes. Not surprisingly, as the ambassador has indicated, a lot of big deals are already flowing from Kazakhstan, inking deals with MasterCard, Amazon Web Services, GE Healthcare, Rio Tinto, and Westinghouse Airbrake Technologies, among others. Uzbekistan brought in air products. This is a $10 billion investment plan and signed agreements for energy, engineering, IT, agriculture, pharmaceuticals, and financial and technical services. Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan also excited considerable business interest. Business loves stability. Thus, measures for keeping Central Asia politically stable as the states on its periphery fray should feature prominently in all the discussions of the C5+1. I could go on with other things, but I think I wanted to pose these questions because I know Fred will be able to answer them all. And so, Svante, I'll stop there and stand back.
Thank you very much, Anders. You have indeed asked all the right questions, which is why we wanted you to speak on this panel. I think we will return to some of them. I'm sure the ambassador has thoughts, but before that, Fred, please, let's see if you have further questions or if you have only answers.
Well, I'd like to start with congratulations, hand out some posies here. I'd like to salute the people in the State Department and the National Security Council and the White House who made this meeting possible. And of course, it was much urged by the Central Asians themselves. And without their initiative, I doubt if it would have occurred. But hats off to these American officials who made it possible. It's not easy to do, as Anders indicated. Now, let me just offer a few comments on areas of achievement and of future achievement, let us hope. Life isn't simple. Let's just take the economy, for example. Yes, there are investments going on and so on, but many firms in Central Asia are really suffering from American sanctions on Russia. And these sanctions are appropriate and needed. On the other hand, the United States has indicated in the past that it might be willing in some way to recompense the firms suffering from these. Is there any news on this front? Is this issue being addressed? It's very important to all the countries involved. This second matter that is transport. Again, bravo to the conferees, the presidents and President Biden for focusing on transport. It is absolutely essential to everybody. The issue here is that to discuss this, you really can't have the Central Asian presidents alone. You must have Azerbaijan, and you should also have Georgia. You can't get to the West without Azerbaijan and Georgia. They need to be in the room in any future discussions of transport involving Central Asia. That goes without saying. And I think we have to admit that this issue is more urgent to the Central Asians than it has been to us up until now. And with good reason. Moscow is planning two, not one, but two transcontinental corridors, east-west corridors, neither of which involves Central Asia in any way. So talking about a new east-west corridor crossing the Caspian through Central Asia, or corridors, we have to be sober and realize that this is going to be in a highly competitive field. And if this isn't advanced promptly and effectively, nothing will come of it. I also want to mention a topic which remains a taboo in Washington, and that is Afghanistan. Ambassador Sidikov correctly, I think, underscored the importance of a trans-Afghan corridor, road and railroad corridor. Why? Because these are landlocked countries, and unless they're going to be totally dependent on China and Russia, a window to the south is essential. Not just to their flourishing, but in many respects to their geopolitical survival. I think it's time for the United States to start talking about this issue and about Afghanistan in general, which it has not gone away and isn't about to. A third issue that has come up, and rightly so, and this has been pressed by people in all 5 countries, but especially by Kazakhstan, and that is communications and information. The United States, this is an area where this issue didn't come up at the C5+1, but it seems to me it could and it should in the coming period. And it has been advanced specifically by Kazakhstan, and the proposal is very simple. The United States has the technology and capacity to create region-wide media. It can be on electronic form, it could be in print form, whatever, but it has the capacity to do this. It could do it in English and in the 5 Central Asian languages. This is not technologically a complex task anymore. Why haven't we moved on this? This is something that, let's hope, that that Washington might actually initiate or at least respond positively to proposals from the region. Now, this brings me to the issue of security. Bravo that the meeting of C5+1 did identify security as one of the key areas, and this has been the case right from the beginning. However, we can't delude ourselves. This is a much more urgent issue today than it was just a while back, and the Central Asians themselves seem much more ready to collaborate across borders for their mutual security. This is a fact we haven't yet fully taken into account, and we should. ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, which the members of which are far more diverse politically, economically, religiously than Central Asian, they have just held their first military maneuvers, joint military maneuvers of ASEAN even. So this security issue won't go away. We should jump on it. We should do it with the Central Asians and not to them. Now, having said all this, let me ask, how is this all going to happen? Well, there's talk of a secretariat. And this is both the American side and the Central Asians themselves have urged this. The question is, where? Is this going to be in Washington, or should it be in the region and maybe move around, or maybe have region-wide offices that are based in more than one of the local capitals? My point here is that the United States needs to come out clearly and forcefully in support of the Central Asians' own initiative to create region-wide institutions for cooperation and collaboration. In principle, the American government favors this. There's no question about that. It's been very clear. On the other hand, why not be proactive in supporting their effort in ways that it could? Why? Because all of them support regional cooperation and integration, all 5. Plus, the Azeris would love to be on board and should be on board, and the Central Asians wish that to happen. Look at presidential visits just within the region recently as evidence of that. The United States can be proactive in this, and what it could do is work from the basis of the Central Asian president's own affirmation at a meeting a year ago in Cholpan-Ata in Kyrgyzstan, in which they specified 24 areas of cooperation and coordination. We could help by gathering information on how that is actually working out, or helping them gather the information on what's being done concretely in each of the areas specified by the presidents at Cholpan-Ata. These are easy steps. They're not costly steps. It would advance the cause, and it would not be against anyone. It would be for Central Asia and for a more effective interaction with Washington. Now, one final point, and that is on the level of meeting. It took 8 years for a United States president to meet with the 5 presidents. Meanwhile, just in the last year, all 5 presidents have met several times, both in Russia and in Central Asia, with President Putin, and they all traveled to China to meet with Chairman Xi, and a grand fiesta is to be held as they open the China's C5+1. Everyone has a C5+1 now. It started with Japan and then Korea. The EU has regular meetings. There's nothing special about America. It just needs to catch up. And in doing so, it has to do it at a top level. Having a presidential meeting on the sidelines of an international conference rather than on its own says it all. The next meeting should be planned now, and it should be on its own, not on the sidelines, and it should be in the region itself. But these are all matters yet to be discussed, but the main conclusion with regard to the U.S.'s future in this is the level of engagement. Up to now, most of the interaction has been at the secretarial or level or below. It's time for it to be secretarial level or above. And that change would alter the situation in a very positive direction. And finally, there is unfinished business. I think of the Jackson-Vanik Amendment. My goodness, this dates to Soviet times. It is something that was devised to foster Jewish emigration from the Soviet Union. Obviously, there's no Soviet Union. Jews have been able to emigrate after the collapse of the USSR, and those wishing to do so from Central Asia have done so or are doing so. So that's no longer an issue, and yet we've never removed this. It's like a stain on our relationship, and why not get the will in the White House to go to Congress and say, look, it's time. Let's move beyond this. Everyone would benefit. It's unfinished business. So let me end with that. I think we've accomplished a lot through this recent meeting. It's a big step forward, but only a step, and it's a long path that we have neglected up to now.
Thank you very much. As we await some, well, I should first say that I would welcome our participants to put their questions and thoughts in the Q&A function on this wonderful technology. But in the meantime, I'd like to ask our speakers, perhaps starting with Ambassador Sidikov, how you perceive with the benefit of your experience. You mentioned in your remarks how things have changed in the past 1 or 2 decades, and how the relationship is very different from what it was. The Central Asia-Caucasus Institute very recently published a paper about the growing agency of Central Asian states with the express, intention of trying to undo the tendencies of viewing the region as a great game or grand chessboard where supposedly outside players are dealing with each other over the heads of Central Asian states. Our argument is obviously that we have states in Central Asia that are very much actors in their own right, and particularly we have the emergence of middle powers in the region, of which, of course, you are the representative of one of those middle powers, I think we can call it. How would you say that this reality, this emergence of stronger sovereignties and middle powers in the region, is this understood in Washington in a way that it wasn't in the past? And how does that influence how this relationship can be developed going further? Obviously, after the ambassador, I'd like to hear from our other speakers as well. I'm afraid we can't hear you, Ambassador.
Sorry. Thanks so much. I believe that recent summit of C+51 was historical. Why? Because you know that till now, Central Asia was a part of American Afghani policy or on geopolitical context. I believe the first time in history, U.S. president meet with the Central Asian presidents as a whole region. Now it looks like United States start considering us as a region, not also part of American policy in Afghanistan or let's say in context of geopolitical situation. And we have seen that because during the C5+1 summit, we discussed bilateral relationship, we discussed economic issues, we discussed security, and it's first time it was between US and Central Asia. I think it's a good step, and I would like to support the idea of Dr. Starr that it was really historical and it was a big success for us. It's very important. And again, you know that you're saying about exchanging that. First of all, you know that I would like to tell about Uzbekistan. I can compare our relationship with the United States in the past and right now. First of all, when President Mirziyoyev changed Uzbekistan, now we're building the new Uzbekistan, totally new Uzbekistan. Actually, approach of Uzbekistan toward the American-US relationships changed itself. Why? Because before we used to talk about with United States only security issues and the other issues. We were trying to avoid so-called sensitive issues like human dimension, human rights issues, something like that. And there was no, let's say, there was no success on economic cooperation. But right now, in Uzbekistan, we are very open. We would like to transfer Uzbekistan into the modern, developed, competitive state. That's why we are keen to have with United States open and constructive dialogue. And I mentioned that there are no any single issues which we cannot talk or cannot discuss with the United States. And especially, you know, as ambassador, I am talking to the United States. We're saying that, okay, we are conducting large scale of reforms in Uzbekistan, and we would like to have more training program from the United States. You know, we need a more skilled, more trained bureaucrats who could rightly implement the ideas and the reform ideas of the President Mirziyoyev. And again, the human rights issues is very important for us. We are very closely working with the United States. We was able to eliminate the cotton campaign, the child labor force issues, which created new opportunity for us to enhance our trade business cooperation with the United States. Now, Uzbekistan, first time in our history, we start exporting textile products of Uzbekistan to the United States market. And you know, this kind of reforms giving us new opportunities to enhance trade and business cooperation between the United States. Again, I would like to tell you that I mentioned many times in the Congress and the State Department, these reforms which are conducted in Uzbekistan, especially on the issues of human rights, we're doing not to please the United States, we're not to get some good records. You know, we're doing for Uzbekistan, for Uzbek nations, because we believe that only through reforms, only to create establishing open society with strong civil institutions, Uzbekistan will be able to become a more strong country in the, as Dr. Starr mentioned, Unfortunately, we live in the troubled time in troubled region. All our neighbors are under sanctions, and we have to survive. And again, I think the good thing that within Uzbekistan and United States, we're seeing that, historically trusted relationship, and our relationship now more sustainable. I think that there's no any issues which could, let's say, destabilize our relationship. We understanding each other. We know where we could have quick success. We know where we have to discuss. We know what's the problems. And again, we know that if any issue come up, we can solve it through dialogue, through cooperation. And again, it's looked like that two countries understanding the importance of the enhancing strategic partnership between the United States and Uzbekistan. And we believe that this cooperation will have very good impact, not only to bilateral cooperation, but it will help to bring sustainable peace in the Central Asia.
Thank you, Ambassador. Anders, do you have any additional thoughts?
Just a couple. I want to expand slightly on something Fred said, because I think it's so critically important. And that is, if I can take some liberties, that is, we need to expand the definition of Central Asia. My sense is that we're still stuck in the post-Soviet period, where Central Asia is five states, not little states, but 5 states bounded by the states that they've always been bounded by, and that they equal sort of individual and singular little analytical entities. Fred mentioned how important it is in thinking about the C5+1 to make it more than a C5. It's got to be more than C5. Think of the bookends here. Azerbaijan seems so obvious that, I'm astonished that it wasn't included in this meeting. And it certainly should be included in all the others. What about Mongolia? Up at the other end of the middle corridor. And most important of all, as Fred mentioned, Georgia, this Central Asian geopolitical entity is not 5 states. The United States never understood this with Afghanistan, which was a central piece of the Central Asian firmament, a central piece of it. It always talked about Central Asia and Afghanistan. And now we've got this very unfortunate set of realities that we have to deal with, trying to figure out how does one pull Afghanistan back into this if it's at all possible, and without an American footprint there at all. But Georgia, at the other end, needs to be part of this discussion. Georgia is in the process of defining and redefining itself and floundering around and trying to figure out where it's going to go. It's not going to go into Europe. It's probably not going to get into NATO in any significant way. It is going to have to redefine its grand strategy, if you will, in different regional terms. That means Turkey. That means Central Asia. That means the corridors. And that means the discussion between the Americans and all of these people on how one deals with China. China is already making a bid for Georgian ports. They understand how important this is, the corridor across. If you don't have Georgia, and Turkey's not part of this discussion, you're not going to have something called Central Asia. You're going to have 5 states talking individually or hopefully a little bit more in concert with the United States, but you aren't going to be able to reach any serious solutions. You've got to expand this definition. You need to think about it as something other than the old post-Soviet states. The second thought, and this Ambassador picks up on some of the things you were talking about. We have to have when the United States is speaking to our Central Asian colleagues, we have to have a language, a strategic language that is understood by both sides. One of the things that I have proposed, I know Fred and Svante have proposed it repeatedly, that needs to happen is someplace in Central Asia. Tashkent would be a great spot. Astana might work. I'd like Tashkent would be a great spot for a serious strategic studies institute that didn't follow the trends, but looked into the future, because your future is going to be all about instabilities all around you. And to the extent that you can understand those and can understand how to think about it, and have a language which allows you to be understood in that understanding by your American colleagues, you're going to be streets ahead of the competition. This is the discussion that's going to allow you to level the playing field, understand where you're going, figure out how you hold hands in the right way. But it can't be based on, well, you know, we're looking at the facts from the last 5 years and you can extrapolate them and it means this. You've got to be more imaginative, because your environment is going to be in the entire firmament of around Central Asia is going to be in rapid and I suspect profound change for the next 2 to 3 decades. You've got to get out in front of this.
Thank you. Fred, do you have any immediate reaction?
Just one observation, and that is this entire discussion, not only now, but as it takes place in many other quarters, is dominated by government people, government offices, government actions, government proposals. But the reality is there is much that can be done, and done right away, to foster this Central Asia as a reality on the international order by the private sector. I have in mind, for example, what the chambers of commerce could do. I strongly urge that the US government people, and at the ambassadorial level, at the Secretary of State level, National Security Council, encourage the United States Chamber of Commerce to engage with all the chambers of commerce across the region, across the expanded region that Anders just discussed. And why? To what end? In order to gather a regional chamber of commerce and to create an organization on a regional basis that will attend to such things as border regimens, visas. They will make proposals on these areas, taxation, financial transfers, all on a region-wide basis. This can be done if the chambers of commerce had a region-wide entity, and they don't today. They talk from time to time, but they don't regularly sit down. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce can be the midwife for the creation of this. This must be a Central Asian and Caucasus body, controlled, dominated by them. But the United States can help bring it about, and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce should take that role of midwife immediately.
Thank you. We have about 10 minutes left, and I know the ambassador has a hard stop at that time. I just summarize the 3 questions that have been raised in the Q&A here very quickly. A first is about digital connectivity across the Caspian into the Caucasus. It seems that this relates probably to the internet connection of Central Asia and how that goes largely through very large powers to the north, if I understand correctly, and perhaps mitigating this. Another one is on whether the US is having any discussions with Central Asia about what's going on in Xinjiang. And the third point is about what achievements should be on the agenda if a biennial summit were possible. Why don't we ask our 3 speakers in the same order to react to any and all of this that they would like to, and then we will probably have to close the event for now and obviously return to the subject later. Ambassador, please.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for reminding about the IT technologies and the digital corporation. I have a good news. Actually, you know, we have an ambitious plan that we would like to transfer Uzbekistan to regional IT hub, which already happening. Because I can tell you right now that now many Uzbek outsourcers company, they're working with United States companies. And I would like to tell you that if on 2018, Uzbek IT export to American market was only 12 to 20 million. Only this year, we already export to American market more than 150 million soft IT products to American market. And now I actually in Silicon Valley, we have 45 Uzbek companies which are operating in Silicon Valley of United States. I think that IT sector could be one of the promising sector of a cooperation between Uzbekistan and the United States. Actually, just recently, in September, we established Uzbek American IT Association here in Washington, which more than 80 IT companies are member of this association. That we believe that coming in 5 years, we will be able to increase our export to American increase our export to American market IT products from Uzbekistan close to $500 million. And the IT sector of Uzbekistan very dynamically increasing, and we're becoming like IT hub. So I think that it's one of the promising area, and the energy sector will be a good sector for cooperation. We already mentioned that IRA product invested more than $10 billion in different sector of the energy sector of Uzbekistan. And again, I would like to say that for us, we considering C+5.1 format, mostly like platform, which will help us to enhance economic cooperation between the United States and Central Asia. Then we, and just in October, we will have ministerial meeting in Samarkand in the frame of C+5.1, Samantha Power. We will go to Samarkand. We will have a meeting, ministerial meeting in Samarkand. The connectivity will be one of the main issues. As you know that Uzbekistan double landlocked country, and the last 5-6 years, the export potential of Uzbekistan increased, and we need access to new markets. We need to diversify our economic ties. And our international routes, that's important for us. So one of the priorities for Uzbekistan now is Trans-Afghan corridor, and second is Trans-Caspian middle corridor. About Trans-Afghan corridor, I can tell a little bit more because as ambassador of Uzbekistan in Pakistan, I used to work on it, and I can tell you that even now we were established to road route from Uzbek city terminus through Afghanistan to Port Karachi. In the last 2 years, we already delivered to Port Karachi more than 2 million metric ton goods from Uzbekistan, which help us to enhance our trade not only with the Pakistan full time, but the Middle East countries too. And again, this structure going very well. There's no any issues. An interesting thing that even the cost of the delivered the good to Pakistan was decreased almost 2 times, which helped us to enhance our trade with the South Asian countries. Again, this more one time showing that idea of the President of Uzbekistan about Trans-Afghan corridor could be game changer projects in Central Asia, because for example, now Uzbek goods, we used to have, let's say that our goods used to have reached the ocean during the 20-25 days before. Now, because of this roads through Afghanistan to Port Karachi, Uzbek goods reaching the Port Karachi only in 7 days. If we will build this Trans-Afghan corridor, Central Asian goods will reach the Port Karachi maximum during the 2 days. I think it will help us to diversify our economic ties. It will help us to diversify our international trans corridors, and it will be very good impulse to our economic development too. Thank you.
Thank you. We have 2 minutes each for you, Anders and Fred, whatever you would like to pick up on.
I will take about half a minute, Svante, but to address the question, what would you like to see happen, or what is possible to happen? It seems to me the answer is pretty simple. Everything we've spoken about here today is possible right now. This discussion can be elevated at the levels of government with a few decisions at the top. This isn't rocket science, but they have to understand what they're getting into. I love Fred's idea about getting the chambers of commerce together. When I look at how competitive the United States is in this environment now, after Afghanistan, the conclusion I reach is that the instrument that is going to be the most powerful driver for American interest is going to be business. It's got to be investment, business, economics right across the board. The idea that the Americans are going to be sophisticated enough to balance their efforts to complicate China's position with the reality that China is all up and down the middle corridor and is bidding for ports in Georgia is just, to me, that's too much of a stretch. I don't think they're going to be able to balance this effectively. So business, let's get investment in there and get this discussion elevated to the highest levels.
Thank you, Anders. Fred, you get the next to final words.
Quick note, and that is the gulf between statement of principle and operationalizing such statements, especially in terms of region. Look at this. We've just heard from Ambassador Sidikov about the progress that Uzbek is making with the United States on the IT front. Well, this is essential. Very, very important development. On the other hand, why isn't this a regional project? It can't be, Uzbekistan can't become a regional hub without the other elements of the region being fully engaged. So the United States and Uzbekistan should broaden this discussion and also link it to the proposal that's come forward from Kazakhstan and other countries, and that is about regional communications and media. These are all interrelated, and what we need is to be more effective in moving from statement of general principles, which we all agree upon now, to operational programs. IT, information, communication is a perfect example of a challenge in that area, and it can be met easily.
Thank you. I'd like to say a very quick thing in closing. The first I stole from a person who's actually in the audience today. He'll know who he is, which is that if you compare the C5+1 achievement to the big Pacific Islands summit that just happened, I think we can take that as a model for what the next step should be at some point in the relationship between the US and Central Asia. After all, this would follow exactly the same logic that was mentioned here of seeing this in a broader context of what's going on in Asia as a whole and Central Asia as part of that. In that view, Central Asia would be, to my mind, obviously a biased one, at least as important as the whole situation across the Pacific. Now, the second point is I would like to connect to what Anders talked about with the US government not seeing the geopolitical, not understanding the conceptual issues related to how the United States sees the world. We've spoken and written about this in the past, but I think it's clear that the realities today mean that the connection across the Caucasus, which is why we are the Central Asia Caucasus Institute, are actually probably more important than ever. Not to take away from the connections that Ambassador mentioned to Karachi in the south, but that's the reality of currently the main connection to the outside world for Central Asia. How is the US government organized? Anders mentioned Mongolia. Well, Mongolia, Central Asia, and the Caucasus are in 3 different bureaus. And even as my little pet project of talking about is that the National Security Council and the State Department don't even agree with each other on what part of the world Central Asia belongs to. It seems to me that even though I agree that achieving the C5+1 meeting at this level was not easy. If we are to build on this, the conceptual levels at which lenses through which the United States government looks at Central Asia have to change. It is not going to work unless a rethinking of these bureaucratic boundaries takes place. And I'd leave you with that thought. I'd like to thank our speakers very much for providing us with a very insightful views of the summit, its significance, and the way forward. It goes without saying that the Central Asia-Caucasus Institute will return to this subject dear to our hearts in the future. In the meantime, I'd invite you for the next event of the Central Asia-Caucasus Institute Forum, which is next week, and which is a launch of a book published by AFPC Press and Armin Lear called A New Secularism in the Muslim World, which is about the relation of religion and state in Central Asia and Azerbaijan. It's on the 4th of October. You have received an invitation. If you've not, it's available on our website. It's at afpc.org and also at silkroadstudies.org. Thank you very much for everybody. Have a good morning or a good evening.